This will be part 1 of my Outlander Blood of My Blood Season 1 Episode 3 review. As always, if you are looking to avoid spoilers from the books or the TV shows, please do keep on scrolling. So the title of this episode was called School of the Moon. And when this episode starts, I think everyone would agree that we thought that Ellen and Brian had slept together. And Ellen's dialogue in this scene is that she is his forever and that he stole her away just like he had said he would. To me, this whole scene felt like a combination of a few scenes from episode 1 of Outlander. And I think as I was watching it, I kept thinking to myself, look how happy she looks. This is so dreamy and idyllic. And then the longer the scene went on, the more obvious it became to me that this was in fact a dream. But I don't know about everybody else. This made me excited for when we get more scenes between Ellen and Brian, because this episode obviously did not have any except for this dream sequence, and I missed them together. Then we get this very abrupt jump to Brian's mouth saying, "Say our daily prayers," at the same time that Mrs. Fitz's voice enters into this scene. And it's almost like a jump scare when the drapes open and we see Ellen laying in bed. Mrs. Fitz goes about carrying out her daily prayers, one of them being that one of Colum or Dougal be chosen as Laird over the coming days at the gathering. And we get this shot, which is actually a clip that we see in the opening credits of Ellen sitting on the bed getting ready for the day. And as Mrs. Fitz starts to present some clothing options to her for the day, you can tell that Ellen is still kind of riding the high of her dream of Brian, saying that she wants to wear something a bit more daring, and her entire demeanor is much lighter than we've seen her in the first 2 episodes following the passing of her father. This is the first time where we see her excited about something or someone. And so she proposes wearing the crimson color, and Mrs. Fitz starts to piece together that she's excited about a suitor, and I think Ellen automatically assumes that she and her are talking about the same person, namely Brian, because she is still unaware of the fact that Colum has promised her to Malcolm Grant. And you have to imagine that for Ellen, Mrs. Fitz is kind of like a mother figure to her just because her mother is no longer alive. And so when she tells Ellen he's a good man, and Ellen thinks they're on the same page talking about Brian, you can see just how excited she gets about her approval and reaction there. And even though Ellen's initial reaction is to say, "I was so worried you'd disapprove, you won't tell anyone, will you?" That's when Mrs. Fitz gets to be the bearer of bad news and informs her that everyone in the castle already knows that she is set to wed Malcolm Grant. Everyone, that is, except Ellen. I personally really loved the scene between Ellen and Colum when she storms in and asks him to tell her that it isn't true, that he has promised her to Malcolm Grant. And he tells her that she should be thankful. And I think that doing this without having speaking to her first, she rightfully calls out the fact that this is Dougal's fault. And now Ellen is paying for his mistakes, and she's valuable to Colum at this point, sure. But she's being diminished by him because she knows that she has more to offer in terms of counsel for him if she's in Leoch rather than shipping her off to the Grant. What I love about this scene is that this is the first time, perhaps for many people watching, that we get this feeling that Colum is getting a little bit too big for his britches, and that in his pursuit of power, he's becoming so headstrong that he truly believes that he's the only person that knows the right way forward for the clan, and he's unwilling to listen to anyone else's counsel, including Ellen's, who up until this point in his life he valued greatly. It's foreshadowing for the rest of this episode, and it also is a great way to set up the fact that the episode is going to heavily focus on the relationship between these 2 characters. And I'm glad for it, because in the books they highlight just how close the 2 of them were, so that it pays off later on when Ellen leaves him. And this episode establishes that relationship really well. One of the first ways they do that is with Ellen saying to Colum that we used to be really close with each other. I helped heal you when you were wounded. I took care of you when you were hurt. And she has to have that history pushed aside for his feelings of what's right for the clan, and she can't understand how Colum can so easily forget all of that history that they shared and love that they share for each other. And so while you can clearly see here that Ellen is hurting from his betrayal, I love this creative choice of making sure that the viewer knows that Colum is hurting too, even though his words are not lining up with that. He's not outwardly saying I'm hurting too with, how he's countering Ellen's argument here, but you can visually see that he is. To me, this episode in many ways was a standout for Seamus, who plays Colum. And this scene is just one example of how subtly he can tell you how he's feeling, even though the dialogue he's delivering is saying something completely different. When we leave the scene at Castle Leoch with Ellen and Colum, we see that Brian has rode his horse back out to where him and Myrta had made camp outside of Castle Leoch. And while at the beginning Myrta was the one really pushing for them to go to the gathering, he is saying to Brian that it's time for us to leave, just as Brian is asking him to stay. So there's a bit of a role reversal there with their enthusiasm towards the gathering. And we as viewers know why that is for both of these characters, but for both of them it's a different reason that the other one doesn't know about yet. Poor Myrta is obviously upset, and when Brian asks him what's wrong, it's the first kind of chip at the facade of their friendship that we get to see. And I think as a viewer, it's an interesting feeling to watch them and not know really how they're going to figure this out between each other. Because poor Myrta tells Brian that he's upset because he found out that Ellen is betrothed. And in many ways, this whole scene made me sort of mad at Brian, because Brian admits that he knew Myrta liked Ellen. But then in so many words, he almost says, I didn't care that much because you had never spoken to her before. But either way, I found it kind of shitty that was how Brian was approaching this conversation. And once he found out that the girl that he was talking to was Ellen, that he really didn't think at all about what he was doing. So when Myrta says, how would you feel if you found out the girl that you loved was betrothed to somebody else? And Brian says, like I'd been stabbed in the heart. You just did that to your friend in some way. At the same time, when Brian finds out that Ellen is engaged to Malcolm Grant, he is in no doubt caught completely off guard, because he had just spent all that time with her and it never came up. And I have to imagine if I'm Brian and I just met Ellen and someone, a third-party person like Myrta, tells me that she is betrothed and I found out that they were engaged and talking to me at the, bridge, I'd be pissed. I didn't love the writing here just because I can't make sense of how they're going to kind of unravel this in a way that doesn't feel rushed. Right now it feels rushed to me, but we're only on episode 3, so I'm trying to, let the show breathe a little bit. Then we jump to Julia, who is still obviously at Castle Leather, and we see where she's been hiding these letters that she's been writing almost as a diary entry. They are tucked up in the ceiling between these boards here, and we can tell that Davina Porter, Mistress Porter, is suspicious of her yet again, and this scene is when she confronts her about the fact that she's been there for over a month, so we get another timestamp, and she has not had her courses. I think when you're trying to convince someone that you're not pregnant, but you are doing this with your belly all the time, maybe not the best way to hide it. And she asks Julia if they want to bring down the flowers. This scene here, when they go down into the kitchen and Davina gives her that bottle of herbs, when Julia knows right away what they are, it reminded me again of just how into botany she was, just like Claire, and that she was very aware of what this medicine would do to her. Savin is a very highly toxic herb. If you even have contact with it on your skin, it can cause burns. It can cause kidney failure. And, even if you have 6 drops of it ingested, you can die. It's very dangerous. But this scene also allows her to call into question the fact that Davina had a child out of wedlock and didn't do this for herself. When Davina presents all of these obstacles that Julia will undoubtedly face if she were to follow through with the pregnancy, it really foreshadows the end of the episode. And Davina's defense is that she was carrying the Laird's son, and Simon knew that she was carrying his child. Simon Lovett was obsessed with the prophecy. I will talk about that at the end of the episode. But for him, having a child is very important. And Davina knew that and unknowingly gives Julia a plan and an escape so that she can keep her child alive and save her child. But Julia tells her she is not with child, and she clearly knows she's lying. But without us realizing, she just gave Julia an escape plan. Come back for part 2.